just amazing sometimes when you put together a sermon and you see how everything fits together. I think you ought to just sit down because it's going too perfect for what else is going on. But so much for what the ladies had to share, and just glad we were able to have a part of that. And then the sermon, I think, today will fit real well, including what she was saying. So if you think about it, we're going through talking about with David. We're on our 10th part of the series. Statement I was given 45 years ago almost. A friend of mine wrote me a card when I was in college and gave me this statement, and it's stuck with me my entire life. Do not doubt in the dark what you believe in the light. How many times do you and I believe something and then dark times come and we start doubting? And you'll find the same thing is going to happen with David. It's interesting when you look at it and some of the things that David is going to go through in this chapter. And you and I can find ourselves, and it's kind of like what the young ladies had to share. But David wrote this in Psalms 27. Listen to what he wrote here and think about what he's about to do in the chapters we're going to look at. In Psalms 27, David writes, The Lord is my light and my salvation. Whom shall I fear? The Lord is the defense of my life. Whom shall I dread? Okay, and he pretty much has done that most of the time. But when you get to 1 Samuel, when you see it today, when you get to 27, David makes a big mistake in his life, as far as I'm concerned. Now think about it. The teachings that you have, when you think about the teaching, in Proverbs 3, verse 5 and 6, it says what? Trust in the Lord what? And all thy heart, lean not unto and all your, and he'll do what? Okay? According to Proverbs 1, who wrote the majority of Proverbs? Who's the author? Solomon. So do you think when you get to chapter 3, verse 5 and 6, that perhaps he's repeating what his dad told him? And perhaps part of it could even be coming from this text when he blew it and he has to tell his son later. So let's look at it. Let's think about it. Some of the challenges we're going to face when we're told to trust in the Lord. That can be in all. Any of you have anything you need to trust the Lord with? Retirement, house, doctors. I mean, there isn't a person in this room that doesn't have something they need to trust the Lord. Taking a test, right? Passing a class. I mean, there's so many different things you have. Or for the young ladies, how do you go? You're going off to college, and how do you pay for it? So many different things. Look at the challenges that you're going to have. I think some challenges he's going to face in 27. One is the circumstances or his calling. Saul just got through, he's chasing him all over, just about got him for the second time, or third time, or whatever in the previous chapter. So you have, but God also called him to be king. So how can he be killed if he's going to be the next king? How many times do you and I recognize what God's promised us, but then our circumstances don't seem to match up? Another one, what about your mind? Any of us have any battles in our mind? David's going to have it. Am I going to solve it myself? Or am I going to let God do it? We have that battle going on. In fact, Romans chapter 8 will tell you that the biggest battle you're going to face is the battle in your mind. A third challenge that David's going to face is at a time. 1 Samuel 16, didn't Samuel anoint him as king? He's waited a long time, and what's happened? You know, he's just wandering everywhere. And so I think sometimes God is giving you a promise, and gave him a promise, but you get tired of waiting, so you start trying to solve it yourself. Did God give Abraham a promise? Did he try to solve it himself? Did Jacob try to solve it himself? There's so many times you and I try to solve it ourselves and come up with all kinds of problems. Another one that you're going to have is wrestling with what others say and see in you versus what you see and feel. If you think about it, did Samuel anoint him king? Didn't Jonathan say you're going to be the next king? In 1 Samuel 20, just don't kill anybody, the offspring. Didn't Saul in 1 Samuel 24 say you're going to be the next king? Didn't Abigail say you're going to be the next king? So why is David doing what he's doing? It's easy to hear what others say, but you and I at times will not see it, and we will fail and we'll fall. So let's look at him. Think about it then for yourself. What challenges are you facing today, and how are you facing? Anybody have any challenges? Or is this just for me? I guess there's two of us. Okay. At least two of us are honest. First of all, notice the mistake he's going to make. He's going to trust in himself. Notice in starting in verse 1, you can ask the question, how could he? In verse 1, he's going to trust himself in three different ways. Notice in verse 1 of 27, David said to himself, now I will perish one day by the hand of Saul. There is nothing better for me to do than to escape in the land of the Philistines. Saul then will be despair of searching for me anymore in all the territory of Israel, and I'll escape from his hand. Okay, so does he believe God's promise? So notice his first thing that he does, he has a humanistic approach. How's he going to solve it? Okay, he's going to run, he's going to go to the Philistines. He's no longer going vertical, he's now doing a horizontal. What is Hebrews 12? You notice it makes the statement in Hebrews 12, verse 1 and 2, we're surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses. Let us lay aside every weight that so easily besets us. And what's the next thing? The sin, definite article. What's the sin of Hebrews? Disbelief. You know what God wants you to do, but you don't believe. But you then get to verse 2, and it says, fixing your eyes on what? Jesus, the author and finisher of your faith. Was David's eyes where they needed to be? No. Humanistic view. Second one, how about a pessimistic view? Does he not say, I'm going to die? He's going to kill him. Are any of you ever pessimistic? That's kind of my nature, and that's something you're trying to overcome. But, being very pessimistic. If everybody says it's, I often get up, if you look outside today, how would your forecaster say it was? Is it partly sunny or partly cloudy? I mean, it's just amazing how we want to look at it. There's 20% chance of rain. Why don't they say 80% chance of sunshine? That's just amazing, but very pessimistic. You think about it in Philippians 4:8, what does it tell us? Whatever is lovely, whatever is a good report, anything excellent, anything worthy of praise, let your mind dwell on what? And where does most of our mind dwell on? Okay, so he has a humanistic view, he has a pessimistic view. Notice he also has a rationalistic view. I'm going to go to the Philistines, he's not going to search for me there. Is that where David is supposed to be? No, he's supposed to be the next king. He isn't supposed to be living with a very rationalistic view. Proverbs 3, he's solving it on his own and not trusting the Lord. So when I think about it, how do you and I make decisions? How do you and I make them? Do we make them by trusting the Lord? Or do we make it by humanistic, rationalistic views, and we solve them all ourselves? And then when we finish and come up with our game plan, what do we say? Lord bless it, right? So notice then, how extensive is the decision? Well, first of all, we saw how he did it. How extensive. Notice in verse 2 and 3, it affects his family and his friends. David rose and crossed over, he and 600 men who were with him. You notice where they go. They go to Gath, which is the city of Goliath. And then notice he also says his men took their household, and David takes his 2 wives. Did it just affect David? It affected 600 men that were following him and all their families. Did he consult them? No. This is what we're going to do. So notice then it affects his family. Notice in verse 4 the false sense of security. Now it's told Saul that David had fled to Gath, so he no longer searched for him. He's feeling good. Who's not after me? Saul. Do you think anybody in Gath would like to kill David? So you think you have a false sense of security, but you're right in the heart of the enemy. False sense of security. You get to verse 5, notice the next thing, how far he has fallen with this. Notice in verse 6 that you have, actually in the end of verse 5, notice how he says, I may live there, for why should your servant live in the royal city with you? Why should your servant? David is making himself a servant to who? The Philistine leader. Do you think when he left, he was going to go that far? Notice one step leads to another step, leads to another step, and now he's saying, I'm going to be a servant to the enemy. It's amazing when you look at it. I think next thing you have, not only submission to the enemy, notice these lengthy compromise. Notice that you have in verse 6 and 7. Notice in verse 7, he stays with the Philistines how long? 1 year and 4 months. 16 months. By the way, you realize in this entire time we was with the Philistines, nowhere in Scripture does it say, is any recorded prayer or any recorded psalm of David during the 16 months. It doesn't say he didn't, but it's not recorded. That's amazing. It's amazing. How many times when you and I are out of fellowship doing things going our own way, do we stop praying, we stop looking for word, we stop doing a lot of things. And we can rationalize it all. And just like he was rationalizing it all. But it affects more than just yourself, it affects your entire family. So notice you think about it, it goes on a little bit further. So the deception now takes place from verse 8 down to verse 12. David and his men, and they go off and they attack different places. They're enemies of Israel. And he goes and he attacks them. But whenever he's asked where he's at, you'll notice in verse 10, he uses the word Negvav, which you have, that it means south. So what he's telling, whenever he has to give a report to the Philistine leader, and each time they go and they wipe out everybody, so there's no survivor that can't say what happened. And David comes back and he says, we were in the south of Judah, the area. So the Philistines, the leader's going to think he's attacking who? Israel. But he's not attacking Israel, he's attacking the enemies. But notice his deception. He's going, notice how he continues to fall down more and more and more. And he's given a deceptive answer to where the Philistines are going to come up with one, but he didn't, quote, lie to him, but he's deceiving him. To where the Philistine leader thinks he is really going out and helping the Philistines and going against Israel. The deception that he had. And notice then what happens, notice, you see that in verse 12, notice he says to David, he has surely made himself odious among his people Israel, therefore he will be my servant for how long? Forever. He really believes so notice what happens. It's interesting when you look at it. Also, you notice you have it in verse 1 and 2, what happens when the Philistines are getting ready now to go fight Israel. Is that going to put David in a bad spot? When he left, he was just trying to get away, but now he's with the Philistines, and now he's with this. Now the Philistines are fighting Israel, and you're supposed to be with the Philistines, and you're his servant. If Philistines are fighting Israel, and you're his servant, what are you going to do? And then how are you going to then be the future king if you're fighting the people you're supposed to be later? You can see he never planned on these things, but he's trusting in himself. He's going from one step to another step to another. So notice it's in verse 12. Notice it's interesting. You have the desertion that you have, and so bad to such a degree that notice what the leader says. Very well, you shall know what your servant can do. And notice what he says to David. Very well, I'll make you my bodyguard for, what does it say? For life. If you're your bodyguard, what are you doing every time the person's going out to fight? And you're now getting ready to go fight Israel, and you're the bodyguard, and so you're going to have to do what? Fight Israel. This isn't what his plan was. Remember, he takes it into his own hands, and notice what happens. Same thing happened with Lot's daughters. Take it into their own hands, and what happens? So you think about it, here you have this desertion. He's a bodyguard. Well, you have the story picks back up in chapter 29. You have part of it with Saul, and he goes. But notice in 29, part with David picks up. And notice what happens. You have the battle. So now they're going to go fight. And they're in their groups. And they're going to fight Israel. And they're going out. And notice in verse 3, the commander of the Philistines said, what are these Hebrews doing here? Is that not David, the servant of Saul, the king of Israel, who's been with us all these years, or days, or other years? And I have found no fault in him, for they deserted. Notice, they see David as what? A deserter. David, does he see himself as a deserter? But notice that's how they see it. They see it as a deserter. Notice the Philistines then are angry, and notice how God uses them to spare David. And you can see why. He says, make them turn back. Isn't this the one David who they said has killed 10,000? Because what they're afraid of, when they're moving towards Israel, you find the Hebrews are in the back. So if you're for the Philistines and you're coming to fight me and I'm Israel, and then all of a sudden in the back you have Shonda and Merrill and stuff and they're Hebrews, what happens? We've got you in a crossfire. And they're afraid that when they come, the 600 fighters of David are going to be in the back. Instead of fighting with the Philistines like they're supposed to, they're going to start fighting for Israel and they're going to be caught, the Philistines in the middle. So they're seeing it as a very human, normal way of looking at it and saying, no, send me back. So now you're having to go back. So here are your great game plan and what's happening. Good. Now God spared you, but you think about it. So they departed and they get back. And notice then what happens. He leaves the next morning. Notice in chapter 30 then how extensive was his decision. He gets back to the city. Takes 3 days to get back there. And notice what happened. The Amalekites come in. And what do the Amalekites do in verse 2? In the end of verse 1, they burn the city. And what do they do in verse 2? It says they took captive women and all who were in it, both small and great. Without killing anyone, they carried them off and went their way. They didn't kill them because they wanted to sell them as slaves and so on in their trade. So here you are. You think about with David and all his men. They go. Now they're thought as deserters. They're now saying, "Oh, you can't go fight." They come back to the city 3 days to get there, and all their loved ones. What's happened to them? Now remember, David made the decision for him to go there, which he shouldn't have. The Amalekites, you remember, that's who David was. One of the ones that he's been raiding and killing every single living person. So Amalekites now have David's people. Humanly speaking, you're going to think what's going to happen to them. They're going to be killed. So think about it, how far he's gone. It affected his family and friends, false security. He submits to the enemy. It's a lengthy deal of 16 months. He has deception. He's seen as a deserter. And now all of a sudden he is in great despair. So much so, notice the despair in verse 4, it says that they started crying and weeping to where there's no strength left in them. Any of you ever been that? It happened. No strength left. And notice then it goes on in verse 6, David was greatly distressed because the people spoke of what? Stoning him. All right, you remember, they all come and are following him, and he has those that are distressed and in debt and depressed and so on. And he's helped them. They've been following him. They've really been doing well. And now they've lost their loved ones. They lost everything. And the only reason they're over there is because of who? David. So notice then, you remember, David tried to solve the problems how? Himself. Look at the predicament he's in. Think about it. It's interesting. How do my decisions affect others? Where you live, do they affect others? All the decisions we make, any financial decision affects others. So you think about it, do I need to make some corrections? Any of you on the wrong road? Any of you see that little deal on that they did that, they had that detour they sent those people on? You see that this last week? And over 200 cars took the detour, and it turned out to be a private road, and they couldn't turn around, and they all got stuck, and all the stuff that's happened because they were following Google Map or whatever it was. How many times do you and I get on the wrong road, and we keep on the wrong road, and it messes us all up? Think about that. Notice then now what he does what's right. After 16 months, he turns, instead of trusting himself, he trusts God. Notice what happens then. In the last half of 6, it says, but David strengthened himself in what? The Lord his God. He's blown it. He recognizes he's blown it, and he needs God's help. Same thing you and I need to do. Every one of us at times will blow it. There's no question. So he trusts the Lord. Notice what he does. So he turns to the Lord. But notice, let's see how he trusts the Lord. It's amazing with this next statement that he has. David then asks for an ephod, which they were then going to, with ephod, ask or seek God's help. Notice the question that he asked. And I want you to think about it. If this was your loved ones, or let's pretend it's your loved ones that are taken and I'm David, how happy would you be if I asked this question? Shall I pursue him? Would you all even want me to ask that question? Or would you automatically say, yes, we are pursuing? Now, that's an amazing statement. They're wanting to stone him, and the longer you wait and ask, the more time the enemy has to what? Now, before, he was doing a rationalistic approach, a humanistic approach. Now he stops and does what he should have done. He's asking the Lord, shall I pursue him? If God had said no, what would David have done? Now, that's an amazing statement. He would have said, okay, we're not pursuing. How would you like to go to your men and say, they've taken all our wives and kids and we're not going after them? Because God told us not to. Isn't otherwise, why does he ask? Notice the second question he asks, shall I overtake him? And notice then, so should I go after him and will I catch him? And notice then what he says. It's amazing how the answer comes back from the Lord. Pursue, you shall overtake them, and you shall surely rescue. Now that is an amazing statement. The chances of rescuing all of everything and all the people alive is next to impossible. When you think about 600 in and all their wives and all their children, a huge number of people. And if you're in the middle of a fight, and someone's coming and you have their kid, are you going to use the kid as leverage? So notice he said you're going to pursue them and you are going to rescue every single one. Now if you heard that, how many of you would be pretty excited about going after it? Okay? So God, he asks, he turns to the Lord, he trusts the Lord, and now he's going to go work for the Lord. It's interesting, he starts off with 600 men. You'll notice when you get to 10, they're pursuing them, and 200 of them can't go any further. They're too tired. So that leaves you how many men? 400. So 400 men, and they catch up. And notice it's interesting too. It says an Egyptian, they found him, who had obviously been captured by the Amalekites earlier as a slave. And they capture him, and they give him food, and they revive him. It said, well, I got sick 3 days ago. You ever wonder 3 days when he got sick, you ever wonder if that's when David prayed? The timing would be about right. David prayed, the guy gets sick, and he knows where they're at and how to get there. They get there. And notice it's interesting, the Egyptian, if you notice, he says in verse 15, promise me, notice he uses their word for God, that you will not kill me. He then takes them there, and notice they get there, it's at the evening, and they're having a big party because of all these possessions that they take, not only from David's people, but also from the Philistines and so on. Notice in 17, David slaughtered, remember he has how many men? 400. David slaughtered them from twilight until evening the next day, and not a man escaped except for how many? 400 on camels. How many men do you start with? So this is an amazing, huge group of people. Do you have camels? No, they had 400 with camels that got away. So how many people are you going up against? And you notice you marched all this time to get there, and you were so exhausted that 200 couldn't go anymore, and now you're going to fight for a whole day after you get there that exhausted? Now that is amazing when you look at this. But they also have a cause to fight for. And God gave them strength. So think about it. You turn to the Lord, you trust the Lord, and then what? You do what he says. That is an amazing group of people. But what God had done, notice he prepared them. And notice they're all out partying, and notice they're drunk and everything else is taking place. And it's to your advantage. God didn't tell them how it was going to take place. God just said go do it. So you think about it, you look at these different ones they work for. Now it's interesting when they come to the spoils, and you're going to find this down in 21 to 25. People, some of the 400 said, hey, we want to keep it all for ourselves because those 200 don't deserve any. We'll give them their wife and children back. But they didn't fight. They didn't. David, they said no. And it's interesting, you have it also, it says, that you look down in it, it's also called David's possessions in 20. So in other words, David was allowed to decide where it went. He gives the possessions then to the 400 that fought, but the 200 who tried and did everything but couldn't go any further, got equal portion. And it says the same was true even to today, talking about when this writing was taking place. But what he also does, you notice in verse 26 to 31, he gives part of the possessions to every place in Judah that helped protect him from Saul along the way. You find that in verse 31. So some of the possessions are going to the men, but some of it goes to the people who helped me. Notice David is not turning back and seeing what? All the people that helped him along the way, and he's giving them something back. So think about how can we apply this today? What are my challenges that I'm facing in trusting God? What are they? There can be a lot of them. You know, trusting Him for finances, trusting for retirement, trusting Him for a house, trusting Him for a college degree, where you're going to go. There's so many things we all face. Are we trying to do it on our own? Or are we going to trust Him to help us get it? Second one, how far have I fallen since trusting in myself? Any of you trusting in ourselves and we've started falling. And like David, you think about how far away that he was when he finally gets caught up. Do my decisions affect others? If I went out and bought a $200,000 car or whatever, you think it would affect Gene? I wouldn't qualify, but you know.
Mail cars be okay.
I would. Think about it. My decisions affect other people a lot. Am I willing to trust and follow His plan? He has a plan. Am I willing to trust and follow it? To trust and follow it. To trust and follow it. To trust and